A few days ago, the Department of Justice added to their massive Epstein Files dump, which is now sitting at something like 3.5 million documents in total. And ever since the most recent release on the 30th of January, I've been digging through to see what I could find. There is still so much to dig through, and new revelations are constantly coming out from people sifting through the data. Just to give you an example of just how much material was released, this recent dump consisted of 4 datasets, which were numbered 9 through 12. Several of the datasets are hundreds of gigabytes in size, and that's with them being compressed into zip files. With all that being said, I'd like to share everything that I have uncovered over these last few days. Just as a warning, a lot of what you're about to see and hear is extremely disturbing, and, just brace yourself. This is one of the most disturbing aspects of the new release, but it gets a bit muddy as what we're about to talk about is clearly a collection of anonymous tips and complaints sent to the FBI, typically via phone calls. One of these complaints, which can be found in Dataset 10, was received on July 4th, 2016, through a report to the FBI's public access line. The call was made by an attorney representing an anonymous Jane Doe to report, quote, the sexual exploitation and rape of a minor child of 13 years of age by Donald J. Trump and Jeffrey E. Epstein. Maher stated that his client, Jane Doe, was enticed to cross state lines to visit with Epstein and Trump to perform sexual acts on both adult men at special parties hosted by Epstein. Doe was told that this was to further her modeling career and something that she had to do. During the summer of 1994, after her 7th grade school year ended, Doe took a 3-day bus trip from her father's home in the Midwest under the pretense that she would be visiting her grandmother. Doe traveled instead to New York City in order to start a modeling career. Doe was initially turned down and asked to return with a portfolio at a later time. While waiting for her bus home, Doe was approached by Redacted and was urged to return to attend a party hosted by Epstein so that Doe could meet important people in that field of work who could help her break into a modeling career. Doe was also told that she would be paid for attending the party. Redacted mailed Doe a buddy pass plane ticket to fly her back to New York. Doe attended 4 of these parties and was paid around $500 for her attendance. Redacted instructed Doe to use the name Redacted at these parties. The complaint then goes into such a graphic description of SA that I can't even read it here verbatim on YouTube. The complaint ends with the following. Doe was then threatened with violence by both men to not make any report of what happened. Quote, "We'll make you disappear like Redacted." It's not clear exactly who this young girl was or if this report progressed beyond the initial complaint. Again, I'm obligated to say that this simply is a record of a complaint made over the phone. Nothing regarding the complaint has been proven definitively, and little to no other information surrounding this phone call is available to the public. Something that I feel the need to mention here as well is the fact that the FBI sits within the executive branch of the United States government, meaning they are directly held accountable to the president. Based on the fact that this was reported to the FBI just months before Trump entered office in January 2017, there's a clear conflict of interest here. Of course, the same goes for the actual release of the files occurring right now, with Trump back in office for his 2nd term. If he really is implicated, well, that means he's the boss of the entire department entrusted with uncovering those crimes. Of course, this one report is just one of many, many reports like this in the files. At this point, I decided to search for more of these FBI complaint forms in the files, and I found this one in Dataset 9. Unfortunately, it's almost entirely redacted. Oh well, surely the FBI had good reason to redact the entire thing. Probably protecting victims' privacy and all, right? Since that's literally the only legal reason they can redact these files. According to the text of the Epstein Files Transparency Act, the U.S. Department of Justice may only withhold or redact information for a very narrow set of legally permitted reasons, most prominently to protect victims' personally identifiable information. They are barred from withholding or redacting information for any other reason. With that in mind, let's move on to the next complaint form that I found. Wait a minute. Are you telling me they redacted the exact same file 2 different ways? Well, they actually did it 3 different ways, because while digging through, I found yet another copy of the same exact document with even less redactions. Let's read this version and see what's inside to try and figure out why they redacted that first one. Complainant stated that she is a professional artist and took pictures of her sisters, 12 and 16 years old, for her own personal artwork. Epstein stole the photos and negatives and is believed to have sold the pictures to potential buyers. Epstein at one time requested redacted to take pictures of young girls at swimming pools. Epstein is now threatening redacted that if she tells anyone about the photos, he will burn her house down. This document is super disturbing to me for several reasons. The first reason is the fact that nearly the entire document was originally redacted by the Department of Justice, even though no sensitive, identifiable information is present, at least not from what I can see. And this is a really big deal because this kind of thing, where multiple copies of documents are found with varying levels of redactions, can be seen all over this latest release of the Epstein files. It's important because it means information is being withheld and blacked out for essentially no reason. These instances where there's duplicate copies we can view directly are where we've gotten lucky, where we can prove that they removed important allegations, testimonies, and other information that might be necessary to painting the full picture. We might never know what information was pulled or blacked out that we'll never get to see. Take this document, for example. Yeah, it's literally just a bunch of black pages. What's in here? Is it another complaint form with damning testimony against elites, or those in power? Did the Department of Justice decide to save their own asses by fully redacting a page incriminating their boss? We have no way of knowing, but because of instances like this, we know that they are absolutely redacting important information that they legally have no right to redact. But there's even more important revelations to be made in regard to this document. Notice the date this was filed. September 3rd, 1996. That is fucking insane. Are you telling me the FBI has been receiving tips against Jeffrey Epstein since 1996 with a damning account of him stealing and selling CP before threatening the photographer with arson, and we're only just finding out about all these very specific details surrounding his crimes? As I'm sure some of you familiar with the Epstein saga have already put together, the photographer involved in this case is Maria Farmer, and she is in fact known as the very first person to file a criminal complaint to law enforcement in regard to Jeffrey Epstein in 1996. Her story is well known and has been well known for some time. We've known for a while that she, at one point, had a lockbox containing her personal nude and semi-nude photographs, as well as the negatives of her younger sisters, which were taken as anatomical studies for graduate art class. This lockbox had been pried open and had its contents stolen by Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell while she was working with them, but more on that later. However, from what I've put together, this release from a few days ago is the first time the public has seen the official complaint to the FBI from when the incident originally happened. With this in mind, and with her speaking out against Epstein and his associates so publicly for years, it's hard to see why they would black out her entire testimony in that first document. It's just plain sloppy, and sloppiness cannot be tolerated with one of the most important criminal cases in American history. Anyways, here's another complaint form, one that's honestly even more disturbing than the others we've just discussed. For context, this was filed by a man named Edward Aragon, the host of an Albuquerque radio talk show known as The Rock of Talk. He went to the FBI after receiving a disturbing anonymous email regarding Jeffrey Epstein's Zorro Ranch on November 21st, 2019. Zorro Ranch was Jeffrey's massive 10,000-acre private estate in New Mexico. It featured a large mansion and other facilities where he hosted guests and obviously brought the girls. It has been repeatedly identified by victims and investigators as a key location in Epstein's shady activities. I suppose I should read the email which he received first before getting to the complaint he filed with the FBI. The email reads, quote, "Edward, this is sensitive, so it will be the first and last email depending on your discretion. You can choose to take it or trash it, but this comes from a person that has been there and seen it all as a former staff at the Zorro. The material below was taken from Jeffrey Epstein's home as my insurance in case of future litigation with Epstein. Sorry, no questions. What is defaming about Jeffrey Epstein is yet to be written. Did you know that somewhere in the hills outside the Zorro, 2 foreign girls were buried on orders of Jeffrey and Madam G? Both died by strangulation during rough, fetish sex. Here are the video footage of Jeffrey Epstein." They then list the 7 disturbing videos he is offering to Edward Aragon. These appear to be fairly long videos, ranging from 7 minutes all the way up to 27 minutes long, obviously containing horrifying evidence of Epstein's evil activities. It seems that he was simply listing the different files here and didn't actually include the files in the email. Please arrange for 1 Bitcoin by 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time today, Thursday, 11/22/19, to the following Bitcoin wallet address. The USB will be sent anonymously to your attention by overnight carrier upon receipt of the funds. You have my assurance this is exclusive, never shared before. No attorneys, no samples, no questions, please. Confirm ASAP. After receiving this email, Edward immediately decided to take it to the FBI. Upon contact, the following report was made. On 11/25/2019, Edward Aragon, personal information redacted, came to the Albuquerque office of the FBI to report an email he received offering 7 videos of sexual abuse and the location of 2 foreign girls buried on Zorro Ranch. On 11/21/2019, Aragon received an email from redacted@protonmail.com regarding 7 videos of SA by Jeffrey Epstein and the location of 2 foreign girls buried on Zorro Ranch for sale for 1 Bitcoin. The email had a valid wallet for the funds. The email had a deadline of 11/22/2019. The author states that the information was insurance against future litigation against Epstein. Aragon believes the email could be valid since he uses his full first name and thinks he is a listener to his radio show. Aragon owns a radio show, Rock of Talk, where he has conducted his own extensive investigation into the Epstein Ranch and has obtained significant information about it. Aragon has been published in other news outlets regarding his investigation. Aragon also consulted other members of the media regarding the email. The consensus was that it may be real and that he should report it. However, again, this is all surrounding a single anonymous email from a potential listener of his radio show. The fact that the show broadcasts to the Albuquerque area, from which the Zorro Ranch is just an hour's drive away into the surrounding desert, might mean the person who emailed him truly was local to the area, worked on the ranch, heard his show, and decided to share the information he had been sitting on. Unfortunately, little other information is available. Aragon did not send the Bitcoin, and as a result, nothing came of the situation. The final anonymous complaint I'm going to be covering in this section is another one that has been heavily circulating online recently, but for good reason. This is likely the most disturbing collection of anonymous complaints in the files, and it was one of several that were taken down from the DOJ's Epstein repository. They have claimed that this was due to technical overload, redaction errors, or privacy concerns, but I really don't buy that. At least not for this specific example. Given the wild accusations that the following file contains against Trump, I wouldn't be surprised if the DOJ was trying to save themselves by taking it down without anyone noticing. It was swiftly put back in its place on their website, I assume upon realizing that the damage was already done. Anyways, let's just get into the file. The first section reads, Redacted reported an unidentified female friend who was forced to perform oral sex on President Trump approximately 35 years ago in New Jersey. The friend told Alexis that she was approximately 13 or 14 years old when this occurred, and the friend allegedly bit President Trump while performing oral sex. The friend was allegedly hit in the face after she laughed about biting President Trump. The friend said she was also abused by Epstein. We then move on to the next complaint. At age 16, while modeling, Caller attended 8 parties at Epstein's New York residence. On one occasion, Caller reported she was sexually assaulted by Epstein. On another occasion, 2 twin brothers, Alan and Orrin, lured Caller and her friend upstairs, but they escaped back downstairs. Caller stated Orrin raped her best friend, and a third brother, Tall, raped a 14-year-old girl named Redacted. Caller named other individuals involved in, quote, big orgy parties with her, other young girls, and older Victoria's Secret models, including Bill Clinton and Donald Trump. Complainant reported she was a victim and witness to a trafficking ring at the Trump golf course in Rancho Palos Verdes, California, between 1995 through 1996. Complainant reported Ghislaine Maxwell as the madam and broker for parties, clients of whom included Epstein, Robin Leach, and Donald Trump. Complainant reported participating in orgies that some girls went missing, rumored to have been murdered and buried at the facility. Complainant reported being threatened by Trump's then head of security that if she ever talked of what went on there or who she saw, she would, quote, end up as fertilizer for the back 9 holes like the other cunts. Complainant claims to have video of high-profile parties, dealings with cartels, and having witnessed Robin Leach strangle a young girl to death at a party. This next one appears to have come from someone who spoke directly with the victim. Quote, the victim reportedly knew about criminal activity that occurred in multiple states and on airplanes, and told complainant there were films of prominent men such as Epstein, Bill Clinton, and Donald Trump, and that Ghislaine Maxwell is in the videos as well. Just across the files we've already gone through so far in the video, we've now heard multiple claims of there being actual video evidence out there of these horrific crimes. Videos that might actually finally prove beyond a shadow of a doubt exactly who was at these parties and what horrific, dare I say, satanic things they did there. Something that distresses me, however, is the idea that, well, with the rise of AI video, how could we ever really prove any of these videos are real? I mean, even if the public is pretty sure that they're real, couldn't the rise of AI lead to issues when trying to actually prosecute or hold these people accountable? Is photo and video evidence no longer enough to prove these people are guilty? This is terrifying to think about because we are desperately in need of some damning, irrefutable evidence like this so we can actually go after these elite pedophiles. So far, it's looking less and less likely that we'll ever actually see any of these videos reach the light of day. But even if they did, could these politicians and billionaires just hide behind the AI defense? I hope not. Regardless, it pisses me off that the FBI seemingly had an endless array of opportunities to obtain these incriminating videos, yet apparently never got their hands on any of them. Not after raiding each of Epstein's homes, not after receiving innumerable complaints from victims, all accusing the same people of doing the same horrific things to them. I find that very hard to believe. It's blatantly obvious that there is absolutely a massive cover-up going on. Granted, we have received a lot of new photos and videos in these releases, which we will be getting into in a moment, but conveniently, only enough to incriminate Epstein himself, who took all of the accountability with him when he took himself out in that jail cell. To me, it's pretty clear that he seems to have been chosen as the scapegoat for this whole operation, with the FBI's story indicating that there were no clients, there were no parties on the island, he just hoarded all the girls for himself, and now he's dead, so it's all over, case closed. Literally nobody is buying that, and especially not now after the DOJ was forced to dump these files. Not after we've looked at this mountain of complaints and tips from victims, identifying the same powerful people, all involved in the same criminal activities. Of course, the couple that we've touched on so far have barely scratched the surface of what's actually sitting in this dump. In fact, just within this one document, it only gets worse as we scroll down. Complainant following up after a call with NYPD officer regarding her previous tip, reporting that she was forced to perform sex acts when she was 13 years old and pregnant in 1984. Complainant also reported there were high-profile individuals involved in her sex trafficking and the murder and disposal of her newborn daughter. Complainant reported Donald Trump participated regularly in paying money to force her to perform sex acts with him, and alleged Trump was present when her uncle murdered her newborn child. Again, I'm obligated to note that these are all anonymous tips and claims. Most of them, according to the column on the right, appear to have been unverified, which means none of these can really be used as proof in, say, court. They seem to have largely just been anonymous phone calls to the FBI, and because the email chain this chart was included in was made in August of 2025, much of the Epstein-Trump information was obviously already a very hot topic and widely publicized. Unfortunately, it seems that the majority of the claimants in this document could not be contacted by the FBI following their initial tips, and as a result, they remain unverified. There have been allegations for some time now that Jeffrey Epstein had a secret child, or even a multitude of secret children that were never revealed to the public. There's actually a lot of evidence to support this, though there's a near total lack of information regarding who these children actually are or where they ended up. Something that isn't talked about nearly enough in the public discussions of Epstein is his obsession with genetics and human enhancement. He appears to have been fascinated by eugenics and the process by which he could create superior offspring. In the early 2000s, he confided to prominent scientists like Marvin Minsky, Steven Pinker, and Martin Nowak about his plan to impregnate up to 20 women at a time on Zorro Ranch, and about his fascination with genetic engineering and artificial insemination, fertility tech, and selective reproduction. These facts specifically are nothing new. It's been reported on for many years now. He also founded the Southern Trust Company in the U.S. Virgin Islands in 2012, which pivoted to DNA mining and genetic analysis, surprisingly amassing $200 million in revenue. With this context in mind, I want to point you to the following PDF found within dataset 12. The document is a scanned copy of some kind of coded scrapbook, apparently written by a victim of Epstein. If the account told within this book is true, I don't know. I really don't even know what to say. If it is, this thing goes so much deeper and splits off into so many different directions than any of us could have ever imagined. The code is pretty easy to crack. You just have to read the top letter, then the letter beneath it, before going back up to the top line and doing the same in a sort of up and down zigzag pattern. The DOJ also figured this out very quickly and translated it back into plain text for easier reading. Here's what it says. Close your eyes, close your eyes, close your eyes. Don't speak, she doesn't talk. I can't stop shaking and it's been a week. A decision was made, but I can't tell Jeffrey. These things happen. Why didn't I close my eyes fast enough? The doctor was different again. I think from Israel. He had kind eyes, but didn't speak directly to me. This was different. A shot and those rod-like things had a hook and so much pain. Ghislaine said to push all the pain away. I don't understand. Blood and water all over the bed, and she was right. Like a feeling when your tummy hurts and you have to push. She said to close my eyes and put her hands over my eyes, but I didn't close them because of these tiny cries. I am so lost. I saw between her fingers this tiny head and body in the doctor's hands. It reached its tiny arm up and had a tiny foot. I closed my eyes, and no more cries. I don't understand. Just say, these things happen. But he doesn't believe that. They yelled and screamed, and he said it would be the same in a couple of months, and she said she was fed up with it all. I don't understand what's going on, and no one will tell me. I can't go to school like this. I can't stop shaking. Why won't anyone make it stop? I know Ghislaine is trying, but nothing changes. Why didn't I close my eyes? The next page contains a mix of magazine clippings and handwriting, which read, A Short Life, Tragedy, My Heart is Breaking, along with, I Know I Am Breaking. Beneath this, a page from a book containing a poem titled Stillborn, of which the girl crossed out the word still. Beneath this, more coded handwriting. In the hall, Ghislaine said she was beautiful. She was, not is. She was a beautiful girl. I heard her. Where is she? Why did she stop whimpering? She was born. I heard the tiny cries. I can't do this anymore. He was right. A couple of months and 2 pink lines with a hold on being with others until after it was positive. I want to die. Why didn't she protect me? As long as I am wearing what you want, there is no respect for me as a human. I am nothing but your property and incubator. You only trust me when I am under your complete control. I will never trust another man ever. I am the only one who provides and sacrifices everything. I give and give out of terror, and you take all of me. You need me to continue, keeping us all connected. We then continue to the next page, which starts off mostly with several clippings. Our finance department deals with all the paperwork. Unfortunately, the finance department is also family. Who knew? I was born a slave. Life in a parallel universe. Unlike drugs, a woman's body can be sold over and over. The slaves in Lake Placid were invisible. People were playing golf at the retirement community, and right behind them was a slave camp. One U.S. shelter has rescued 10,000 child prostitutes. We then go to the handwritten code on the page, which reads as follows. This is not surprising, but there is no such thing as a child prostitute. They are children and cannot consent. They are missing the biggest in my own backyard and so many more. Like Mar-a-Lago and where I see Mr. Joe and Mrs. Ann. The following page contains a dictionary definition for the word release, as well as a clipping from a 2003 National Geographic article on slaves in the 21st century, with a small handwritten section in the bottom right reading, "Please release me from this torture and hell." Controlled all by Jeffrey, all the time. Get away from it all. And go to New Mexico? What in the hell? This makes no sense. What about school? Behind the scenes, he is now controlling everything when it used to be Ghislaine who some days acts like she hates me. Secrets of all of them. I am tired of keeping this secret. I know people are wondering, but I can't tell. I am exhausted. Broken promises. I don't understand why she is treating me on some days like I'm the enemy, but then we lay in bed together and she is how she used to be. Warm. He makes her feel my tummy and it's so sad and confusing. Superior gene pool? Why me? It makes no sense. Why my hair color and eye color? That feels very Nazi-like, but in thinking about these stupid, insane theories he has, I guess in his mind it makes sense. The piano and music comments are made to convince me this is right and will create perfect offspring, he calls them. I don't think it works that way, and it's making me hate playing altogether. Piano or viola, I am starting to resent them both. I miss the person I was before I was made into what feels as a human incubator. My friend, Redacted, realized much of everything and came to get me out of Mary's. She made me leave all things of value on the bed. She put all my belongings in trash bags. I have maybe avoided New Mexico. I have been staying with friends, but never more than 2 or 3 nights because my mother is on the warpath. Redacted have been great, but Redacted saw me changing and knows about the baby. He said he promises to help me and we will figure out what to do. Next, there's an odd page with a red splattered pattern all over it. My heart belonged to her. She was so very beautiful. She was perfect. I can't bring myself to write what happened. I am beyond broken. I only got 10 to 15 minutes to hold and feed her before they took her. She is mine. I want her back. Distraught. Help me, please. Can't anyone find me? Barely survived all those procedures. My heart is gone. April 22nd, I had no choice. I wasn't ready, and she wasn't ready. My mother had found me, and it was urgent. After so many bonding moments with Jeffrey, Ghislaine, their baby inside me, with me in the middle, she wouldn't even look at me. We said nothing to one another, and I was so confused. When we arrived at Palm Beach, I was taken to a house close to Jeffrey's, I think called Ocean Boulevard or Street. But it was close, and I was alone, except for a new driver, not Mr. Juan. An elderly French lady whose pictures on the wall didn't have her. She had a thick accent and was kind. She said she had been born to deliver babies and had been doing so before I was born. Similar as the last one with shot and hook, but too much blood with so much water and unbearable pain. She put her hands inside of me and seemed worried. I didn't understand. Something about the baby facing the wrong way and putting pressure on a placenta. Things would have to be different. She said I had to be brave and strong and listen to her directions so she could help safely get the baby out. I was terrified seeing so much blood on the bed and floor and started to panic. She had me flip over to my hands and knees and had me push and push, and it was so excruciating. I could feel everything as she tried to guide the baby out, but I was so tired. I felt I was dying, but suddenly, she had caught a beautiful baby girl who made more than a whimper, but beautiful cries. She let me hold her and washed her and brought her back clean and perfect. She smelled so good and showed me how to feed her. But only after maybe 15 minutes, Mrs. M came to take her. I was hysterical and begging for more time. He said those horrible girls were in the car waiting, but I wouldn't let her go. The old woman promised me she would be safe, and I had to let go. 4 pounds, 10 ounces, 18.5 inches long, with beautiful long fingers. I am dead inside. Life has no meaning. I don't want to be here. 6 weeks wasn't even given before being sent back. Punishment for trying to run. Why can no one help me? Ghislaine is gone. I am so lost, and my heart is broken. Is this my destiny? I need them, everyone, all to see. I still always dream to build a better world. She went from being a beautiful young girl to a sad, broken child, but maybe a hope that after it all, I still truly had it within herself. One day, I aspire to be like this. She came in like a lamb and went out like a lioness. The final page of the scrapbook shows a little girl with her back to the camera, carrying a sunflower. Of course, these files don't come with much context. We're just handed the raw documents they collected during their probes into Epstein, so from what I can put together, we have no idea who this girl was, where she ended up, what the finer details are from within this disturbing and powerful scrapbook, and perhaps most horrifying of all, what happened to these children? We're left with tons of questions regarding what exactly this girl's role was, given her vivid descriptions of giving birth. She states in certain areas of the scrapbook that one of the children she carried was Ghislaine and Jeffrey's. This, along with her referring to herself as the incubator, leads me to believe that she was a surrogate mother for a child whose biological parents were both Jeffrey and Ghislaine. However, this contradicts with other statements she makes regarding her own genetics, such as this line from earlier where she states, quote, "Superior gene pool? Why me? It makes no sense. Why my hair color and eye color?" This seems to imply that she is not just a surrogate mother, but that her genes are actually going to be inside of the child, that her eggs are going to be used, not Ghislaine's. Of course, there definitely seems to be mentions of multiple different pregnancies and births, which leads me to the conclusion that, according to the book, one of these children were born and passed away almost immediately, but that one or more children did in fact survive and were carried off to who knows where. Jeffrey Epstein's brother, Mark Epstein, has publicly denied the idea that his brother ever had a child, claiming that he would have told him if he did. Unfortunately, there's almost no other information available on this scrapbook, and I'm not sure that I really want to speculate much farther than I already have. If you have any other theories or ideas behind what might have happened here, or if you picked up on something that I didn't, please let everybody know in the comments. This is more of a logistical problem with the files rather than something that was actually found involving Epstein, but because the DOJ is the facilitator and owner of all this information and is responsible for delivering it to the public, and has a clear track record of pushing back against doing so in an effective manner, they've put themselves into a situation where they appear to be implicated in the cover-up of Epstein's criminal activities. This, of course, is nothing new. With all that being said, there are many issues with the actual release of the files we're discussing right now that is a major topic of discussion, in some cases, even more so than the actual contents of the files themselves. For instance, at first glance, it seems that you can just view all of the files by scrolling through them on the website, but unfortunately, and they don't make this clear at all, their website appears to only be capable of displaying a list of PDF documents. Now, that does mean lots of information is available to view directly on the website, but left out are the videos, some photos, any other files contained in the datasets that aren't PDFs don't seem to be listed in these public lists. The only way to view these hidden files are to actually download the entire dataset zip files yourself and view them on your own computer, not in the web browser. The problem is that the downloads sometimes literally just don't work. Other times, they have even been pulled from the website and currently aren't even being hosted. There are all kinds of reports of people trying to download the larger datasets, which are, again, hundreds of gigabytes, and having the downloads fail somewhere around halfway through. Others simply don't have enough space on their hard drives to even fit the whole thing. Unless you have something like a terabyte of free storage, you probably aren't going to be able to download and unpack the full contents of the files, if you can even get the download to finish before it cuts out. Even if you do manage to get the zip files downloaded and stored on your computer, many times they come through corrupted with the extracted files containing unreadable data. On top of this, people have noticed gaps in the file numbers indicating that some have been removed from the official lists. Other people have actually viewed these documents before they were removed from the datasets as well, with some of them being saved and others apparently being lost. The DOJ is not publishing any public change logs, and as a result, it's difficult to say how many important files are being pulled or changed without our knowledge. In general, the website is just so broken. There are just pages and pages of PDF files on the website that you can view, but after a certain point of scrolling through the pages of files, you end up just breaking the list entirely, so I couldn't even figure out how many pages of files there actually were. On the website, if you just keep clicking on to the next page and next page and next page of results, it will just keep going forever, literally into the millions if you keep clicking. I'm not really sure what this is about or if this is really significant. Hopefully this error is fixed at some point, but I don't have very high hopes. I know that's a lot of information, but all of this is to say it's taking quite a long time for us to actually dig through these files. It's like navigating a maze. Sure, they've been released, but it was done in such a haphazard way that we can barely even access them. In some cases, we can't even access the full zip file. With the downloads failing around halfway through, or really at any point before we even get to the end of the zip file download, we aren't able to open them at all. And that's because of the way that zip files work. There's a directory which is downloaded all the way at the very end of the zip file, and if you don't get that complete download, all of the data that you downloaded cannot be extracted and viewed. Even worse, apparently the DOJ screwed up big time and accidentally released uncensored, unredacted, explicit imagery and video of some of the victims in some of the files. From what I've read, this is why, at the time of my scripting this, it's not even possible to download the full zipped dataset 9. This dataset is the largest dump of photos and videos from the Epstein files, and apparently, inside of here is where they made that horrific mistake. Needless to say, I did not end up downloading dataset 9, and I do not recommend that any of you try to do so, even from unofficial channels. There are many unofficial sources attempting to share half-downloaded versions of it through peer-to-peer file sharing, but knowing what's in there and why the DOJ took it down, yeah, probably better safe than sorry on that one. Hopefully they can scrub dataset 9 of any revealing or illegal material ASAP, because, again, it seems to contain the vast majority of pictures and videos from the dump. Pictures and videos which may be necessary in holding certain people accountable. We need to see exactly who Epstein's clients were so that they can be held accountable for their evil desires and actions. I can only hope that the DOJ feels the same way. With all that being said, and again, without downloading dataset 9 on my own, these are some of the most disturbing images I've collected from the files that I was able to get my hands on in more of a safe and secure way. If you've been keeping up with everything going on over the past few days, you've probably come across some of these images. There's this one of Prince Andrew leaning over some young girl. We don't really know who she is or what's going on in the photograph. Next, there's this one showing a cross with something redacted in front of it. There seems to be a theme of Epstein and these other elites mocking Christ and Christianity, so I wouldn't be surprised if there's something really disturbing behind this black box. Again, we really don't know. This one's been circulating all over the internet. It's a photograph of a raw chicken and multiple human legs. This one seems very disturbing at first, but it's actually just an art piece by a man named Harold Sewart. The picture was found in Epstein's Google Drive, and from what I've gathered, the person in the photograph was digitally edited in. A lot of people have been cropping out the watermark at the bottom, which makes it clearer that this is just some strange piece of art that Epstein downloaded from the internet. Probably nothing more to this image than that. Needless to say, he was a weird guy and into some weird shit. That's probably the mother of all understatements. Of course, there's a multitude of new photographs of former President Bill Clinton hanging around with Epstein. No shocker there. Another photo of Prince Andrew lying on a bunch of girls' laps with Ghislaine Maxwell in the background. This one's just uncanny looking with all the redacted faces. Something like you'd see in an analog horror video, not with a member of the royal family. I have a feeling this was already released beforehand. Maybe it wasn't, but this is a photo of what Epstein's cell looked like following his death. I'm baffled at the amount of different sheets that were present in the room. I can't tell if those were all from his bed or if he, requested more of them for some reason. This next one is a video which appears to show a girl whose entire image has been redacted by the DOJ. However, what makes this already disturbing video miles more unsettling is the fact that we can see a DNA paternity test kit on his desk, seemingly indicating that at one point, potentially with the young-looking girl in the video, Epstein felt the need to see if he was the father of someone's child. As with the others, no other context or information is available. And just in case anyone was wondering if this video was actually filmed by Epstein, the video listed directly before this one in the files, clearly taken in the same instance, shows a paper on the desk in front of the person filming. The only words visible on the paper are Jeffrey E. Epstein. I don't really feel like showing many of the other videos that are in here. They are all heavily censored, of course, but just knowing what's behind some of these boxes is too much for me to post here. I tried to look through to see if there was anything interesting or incriminating against other people, but for the most part, it's just disturbing videos of young girls dancing, and of course it's all redacted, so it's just very strange. I was up until 2 a.m. working on that section, and it just, I don't know, left me with a very sick feeling in my stomach. On top of that, there's also just videos like this one. Typically, these are several second clips of essentially nothing except for a black box. Next, I found this collection of several strange videos containing several people, but they center around a figure who appears to be a young girl in one of Epstein's residences. Even though these are censored, I'm going to blur them anyways because, again, they're explicit and I don't really know what's going on here. The girl is wearing this see-through outfit and rings this red bell in different clips. There appears to be some writing on the bell, but I can't really tell what exactly it says from the short clips. Next, there's this fucking abomination of a video. In this one, Epstein is seen chasing a group of girls around his kitchen, acting like he's a kid himself. It's just disturbing to see this monster acting so innocent and playful. I don't know, this one just gives me chills. This appears to have been a folder of developed film prints from around what I can only assume is Jeffrey Epstein's island. I include this one not because of any particular revelations inside, more so just because of how uncanny and ominous these photos are. They depict these otherwise beautiful scenes. If it weren't for these black boxes and whoever or whatever is behind them, the photos easily could have been postcards depicting a tropical paradise. It's only with the context of Jeffrey Epstein that we realize this couldn't be farther from the truth. Who are these people? Where are they now? Are they okay? What happened to them? What did they experience on that island? Of course, we'll probably never know. In a separate file, we find this photo. Looking more closely into the background, we see that Epstein is surrounded by boxes which say CIA. Again, we're left with more questions than answers. Where was this photo taken? Who was he with? What was he doing there? What's he doing with the CIA? Again, we'll probably never know. This next file contains a bunch of photos showing Epstein with a variety of people, including several children who he appears to either be hugging or sitting next to. Again, just very creepy. No idea who this girl is or why there's a massive framed photograph of it hanging up on a wall. That's pretty much the gist of the most notable stuff that I found. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go throw up. If you've been following my Forbidden Knowledge Iceberg series on this channel, then you might remember my coverage of Epstein in a previous installment of that series, with the focus being the allegations and evidence of his ties to Israel, as well as his various potential connections to intelligence agencies, such as Israel's Mossad. There are multiple facts that really seem to indicate that this is the case, but honestly, none of which that prove this is true beyond a shadow of a doubt. Lots of circumstantial evidence, you could say. From where I stand, the key intelligence connection was through Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell, the media mogul who owned a vast publishing empire comprising Pergamon Press, Macmillan Publishers, as well as Mirror Group News, which runs the Daily Mirror. His vast media empire meant that he really did have quite a large amount of power over public narrative in the media. All that being said, Robert Maxwell is all but confirmed to have been a Mossad agent in the 80s, smoothing deals to allow for the sale of bugged Promise software into United States nuclear labs, leaking untold swaths of nuclear secrets back to Israel for their own development of a nuclear weapon. Again, I covered this in depth in another episode of the Forbidden Knowledge series. He served as a back-channel communicator, covertly delivering messages for Israel to and from high-level figures, and has been described as an asset by former Mossad officer Ari Ben-Menashe in the 1990s. Ben-Menashe then goes on to explain in his accounts that Robert Maxwell is the one who introduced Epstein to Israeli intelligence, which continued following Maxwell's death through his daughter, Ghislaine Maxwell, who obviously remained his main accomplice throughout his criminal activity. When Robert Maxwell died, he was buried in Israel with Israeli President Chaim Herzog delivering the main eulogy and Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir also in attendance. Reports consistently mention at least 6 serving or former heads of Israeli intelligence services also having been present at the funeral. Ari Ben-Menashe also claims that Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and Israeli intelligence targeted U.S. politicians and elites with underage girls to gather compromising material for Israeli leverage. He specified that Epstein ensured victims were minors to make acts criminal, not just embarrassing. Further compounding evidence of this comes from the actual victims and investigative reports from the authorities. Now we're going back to that 1996 complaint form from earlier that we looked at involving the artist Maria Farmer and the explicit photos that Epstein stole from her. Well, the way that she got into that situation was that she had been employed by Epstein as an art advisor, scout, and receptionist at his East 66th Street townhouse in Manhattan. She acquired art, greeted visitors, and ran errands with Ghislaine Maxwell. Of course, with Maria being the very first person to report Epstein to the authorities, this was well before any of these allegations were known, so Maria Farmer is not to blame for not knowing about this stuff. During her time working for him, Epstein personally showed Farmer a hidden media room or security room with multiple monitors displaying live feeds from hidden pinhole cameras in bedrooms and bathrooms throughout the townhouse. She explains that he led her through a concealed door disguised in an interior limestone wall. Pushing it open revealed a room equipped with banks of monitors, TVs stacked on top of one another. She noted the presence of men seated in the room, actively watching the footage, whom she believed at the time were part of Epstein's security or monitoring team. According to Farmer, quote, I am never going to use the restroom here, and I'm never going to sleep here, you know what I mean? It was very obvious that they were, monitoring private moments. She described that the entire house was under constant video surveillance with cameras capable of capturing highly personal activities. Later, she spoke to multiple sources describing Jeffrey Epstein's network as a blackmail ring tied to the mega group, a network of pro-Israel billionaires, including Les Wexner, whom she referred to as, quote, the head of the snake. With all of that background in place, I decided to look through the recent DOJ dumps to see what new evidence might have come out in regard to the blackmail ring. And yeah, there's a lot. We'll start off with this document. This PDF comes from Dataset 9, and it's a copy of a confidential human source reporting document. This is a completely different kind of document from the FBI complaints we discussed at the beginning, because a confidential human source is essentially a formally vetted informant who is actively registered and working with the FBI. Their identities are known internally, they're subjected to rigorous vetting, suitability checks, and periodic validation of their statements, where they are continually checked against deception indicators. With this in mind, what you are about to read is from one of these confidential human sources. Date of contact, 10/16/2020. Captioned confidential human source, CHS, was asked by the handling agent about information he or she may be aware of related to improper domestic or foreign influence over the electoral process in the US. CHS already provided some of this information documented in previous reports, but he or she expanded on several matters as described below. Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz. CHS learned that Dershowitz influenced many students from wealthy families. For example, Josh Kushner and Jared Kushner were both his students. Dershowitz told CHS that if he were young again, he would be holding a stun gun as an Israeli intelligence Mossad agent. CHS believed Dershowitz was co-opted by Mossad and subscribed to their mission. CHS still continues to communicate occasionally for Dershowitz. Butting in here for just a minute, for context, Alan Dershowitz, again, is an American attorney who taught at Harvard Law School from 1964 until his retirement in 2013. Dershowitz served on the defense team that helped secure Epstein's lenient 2008 non-prosecution agreement, following some of his initial public trafficking allegations. I also feel that it's important to note that above, when the source references how Jared Kushner was a student of Alan Dershowitz and that he had influence on him, well, Jared Kushner, for those who don't know, is Donald Trump's son-in-law through his marriage to Ivanka Trump. Jeffrey Epstein was represented by Dershowitz. CHS remembered Dershowitz telling Alex Acosta, the U.S. attorney of the Southern District of Florida at the time, that Epstein belonged to both U.S. and Allied intelligence services. CHS shared phone calls between Dershowitz and Epstein, during which he or she took notes. After these calls, Mossad would then call Dershowitz to debrief. Epstein was close to the former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Barak, and trained as a spy under him. Barak believed Netanyahu was a criminal. Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the United Arab Emirates are allied against Qatar, Turkey, Iran, and Syria. One of CHS's redacted, who presumably worked redacted, asked CHS a lot of questions about Epstein. CHS became convinced that Epstein was a co-opted Mossad agent. CHS advised Chabad is doing everything they can to co-opt the Trump presidency. Chabad is basically state-sanctioned Judaism. It is used by Putin to keep tabs on all the Russo-Jewish oligarchs. On the day Trump was elected president, Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner were at the gravesite of Rabbi Schneerson, who was the most powerful rabbi in the Chabad network. Kushner has moved a lot of Russian investment money around. The FBI should investigate Kushner's family charities to find evidence of corruption and money laundering, as Chabad routinely uses charities to launder money. CHS provided the attached article entitled Jim McGreevey and His Main Man by Craig Horowitz, published 9/10/2004. While the article is old and centered on Charles Kushner, that is, Jared Kushner's father, it highlights and documents the deep ties the Kushner family has with Israel and their history of corrupt business practices and alleged violations of election laws. CHS stated that if the FBI is serious about investigating the Kushners and their relationships with Middle East, they should look closely at Ken Kurson, who, quote, knows everything. CHS advised that this was a real collusion story. Trump has been compromised by Israel, and Kushner is the real brains behind his organization and his presidency. After coming across this document, I thought to myself, well, I wonder what else of note I could find if I can locate any more of these CHS reporting documents. I realized that at the top of the form, there's a name for these forms, FD-1023. Given the fact that these forms have much more credibility to them than the anonymous tips from earlier, I decided to plug that into the DOJ's Epstein Library search engine and got 30 results back. Of course, I decided to flip through each of these. That search led me to this next document from another confidential human source, with the date of contact for this report being December 23rd, 2021. US Per, short for a specific US person identified by the FBI, had been to Epstein's residence and believed he was a, quote, construct who was playing a role. Specifically, Epstein was running an Israeli state-sponsored technology collection and extortion operation. This assertion is backed up by two variables. One, who his benefactors and assistants were. Two, what activities he was involved in. Due to the number of secrets Epstein must have been aware of, it's not surprising that he did not last long after being put into custody. Epstein started with two main sources of money. Epstein was very close with Ghislaine Maxwell on all aspects, legal and illegal. Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell, was a very wealthy Israeli intelligence Mossad agent who died in the 1980s after falling overboard from a yacht. But it was widely suspected he was assassinated. Maxwell was very close to Epstein and is currently being prosecuted for helping him groom young girls to have sex with visitors to Epstein's estate. Epstein's operation lured some of the most powerful and influential people in the world to his home, where they had the opportunity to have sex with young girls in lavish situations. This would have been recorded in some way, which could be used to control and extort non-cooperators as needed in the future. The American billionaire and founder of Limited Brands, Leslie Herbert Wexner, was born in the US by parents of Russian Jewish origin. Wexner formed close relations with Epstein in the 1980s and became his primary benefactor. Wexner let Epstein run his business from one of his homes. With his mysterious and seemingly endless source of investment funds, Epstein went on to become one of the biggest donors in cutting-edge technology being developed at Harvard and MIT, and gained full access to the research facilities as a result. Epstein was represented by Harvard professional Alan Dershowitz, who is a staunch Jewish Zionist with suspected connections with Mossad. The rest of the raw text was redacted, and unfortunately, unlike earlier, I was unable to find another copy of it that the DOJ decided not to redact. Again, as we discussed earlier, this could have been a completely meaningless redaction that didn't protect anybody except for the people who are implicated in these crimes. There could be some horrible information in here regarding further connections between Epstein and Mossad, but of course, we will never know because the DOJ decided to redact it. Anyways, here's a section from another CHS reporting document. CHS worked as a redacted when the first Epstein plea deal was struck between 2005 and 2008. CHS believed both Maxwell and Epstein were Israeli spies. Maxwell's sibling did a lot of stuff for the Israelis, and her father was a Mossad spy. CHS commented that one of the things spies do is try to take photos of themselves with prominent people, rich and famous people, and then present this to their handlers to give themselves credibility. CHS believed Maxwell would do this frequently. One such example was the photo of Maxwell with Elon Musk, which was part of her con to take photos with prominent people. This is all obviously super interesting stuff. It would be interesting to know who these sources were and if these allegations were ever verified by the FBI. There's obvious circumstantial evidence that Epstein has ties to Israel, but unfortunately, nothing that's been released yet seems definitive enough to be considered direct, damning, irrefutable evidence of his involvement with intelligence. However, with that being said, of course, there can only be so many coincidences before things start to smell a little fishy. If he truly was affiliated with a high-level agency like Mossad, a group who knows how to cover their tracks with stuff like this kind of lack of a paper trail is exactly what you'd expect to find, making it extremely difficult to separate these theories, hunches, and the insane coincidences we tend to see surrounding Epstein from hard, damning, irrefutable proof that he truly was operating a honeypot blackmail operation against the elites in our country. Again, don't get it twisted, I definitely think that that's what was going on, but in order to prove it to everybody, including the people who are not as in-depth into the files as we are, we kind of need some video or photo that just blows any sort of argument out of the water. Unfortunately, due to what we've just read about our politicians and political elites potentially having been corrupted and captured by this very blackmail scheme, the United States government could and might absolutely be complicit in a large-scale cover-up, especially if someone like Donald Trump has been compromised. Howard Lutnick, the billionaire CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, a powerhouse Wall Street firm, has long positioned himself as a financial titan and philanthropist. He was Jeffrey Epstein's literal next-door neighbor, living alongside his now infamous Manhattan townhouse during the 2000s and 2010s. Lutnick's ascent to power reached a new political peak in 2025 when President Donald Trump appointed him to be the United States Secretary of Commerce, a role placing him at the epicenter of U.S. economic policy, trade negotiations, and regulatory oversight. Lutnick is frequently photographed alongside Trump at Mar-a-Lago events and White House briefings. However, of course, the recent Epstein dump has exposed a stark contradiction in Lutnick's public narrative about his Epstein ties. In multiple pre-2026 interviews, Lutnick insisted that he and Epstein only had one single brief encounter. On a 2025 podcast, he described visiting Epstein's home in the mid-2000s, recoiling at the financier's gross and disgusting comments about women, promptly leaving in a matter of minutes, and apparently vowing never to speak to him again, framing it as an immediate moral rejection that ended all contact.
His assistant, on like a Saturday, says, "Mr. Epstein, your neighbor would like to invite you over for coffee." So my wife and I go next door. So he gives me a tour in the living room, big living room. And then across from it is double doors. I assume it's the dining room.
Yeah.
And he opens the doors and there's a massage table in the middle of the room.
Ooh.
And candles all around and stuff. massage table in the middle of your house? How often you have a massage? And he says, every day. And then he gets weirdly close to me.
Ooh.
And he says, and the right kind of massage. So she looks at me and I look at her and we say, I'm sorry, we have to go. And in the 6 or 8 steps it takes to get from his house to my house, my wife and I decided that I will never be in the room with that disgusting person ever again, socially, for business, or for even philanthropy. If that guy was there, I wasn't going because he's gross.
Oh.
And so I look back at it as a gift of a void.
Yeah.
And so, yeah,
So
that's
he
my
would-
story. A one and absolutely done.
His apartment, said you were disgusted, would never have any contact with him again. Did you, in fact, make the visit to Jeffrey Epstein's private island?
I did have lunch with him as I was on a boat going across on a family vacation. My wife was with me, as were my 4 children and nannies. I had another couple they were there as well with their children, and we had lunch on the island. That is true, for an hour, and we left with all of my children, with my nannies and my wife, all together. We were on family vacation. We were not apart. To suggest there was anything untoward about that in 2012, I don't recall why we did it, but
Mr. Secretary, again, as I said, there's not an indication that you yourself engaged in any wrongdoing with Jeffrey Epstein. It's the fact that you believe that you misled the country and the Congress based on your earlier statements, suggesting that you'd cut off all contact when in fact you had not. And you realize that this visit took place after he'd been convicted, right? I mean, you made a very big point of saying that you sensed that this was a bad person in 2005. And then, of course, in 2008, he was convicted of soliciting prostitution of a minor. And yet you went and had this trip and other interactions.
Lutnick, an elite politician making massive decisions in the United States right now, completely lied about his interactions with the world's most infamous child trafficker. Emails and calendar entries reveal sustained interactions between Lutnick and Epstein well into the 2010s. There's a very clear pattern here of elites just completely ignoring this past conviction. They all seem like they were just completely willing to sidestep this and sweep it under the rug. Absolutely disgusting. A standout 2015 email from Lutnick personally invites Epstein to a high-profile Hillary Clinton fundraiser, reinforcing their ongoing social and political overlap in spite of Epstein's 2008 highly publicized conviction. This discrepancy amounts to a profound public deception from a man now wielding immense authority in our government. As Commerce Secretary, Lutnick often stands shoulder to shoulder with Trump when discussing issues like China tariffs and digital assets. The files clearly expose a pattern of revisionism that further destroys public trust in a cabinet tasked with representing us American citizens. Let us all be very, very clear here. I think I can speak for everyone when I say these people do not represent us. They are not our representatives, and they don't deserve to be calling themselves that any longer. These people are absolutely disgusting. They're liars. They're compromised and corrupt, and they're currently sitting at the absolute pinnacle of power. Don't forget to pay your taxes, everyone. This one was pretty sad to see. I know plenty of people who have put their trust in Elon, seeing him as an innovator intent on carrying the human race forward with Tesla, SpaceX, and his other companies. And while I'm not going to take any of that away from him, and I do believe he's done a lot of good, these next few emails are something I don't see him dodging or talking his way out of. This email chain, released in the recent batch of files, occurred between Elon Musk and Jeffrey Epstein years after Epstein's widely publicized 2008 conviction for soliciting prostitution from a minor. Epstein had pled guilty to those state charges in June of 2008 involving solicitation of prostitution with someone under 18. His crimes and lenient plea deal were major news stories at the time, covered extensively by media outlets, making his status as a convicted sex offender public knowledge well before this correspondence between him and Musk began in December of 2012. The DOJ's recent release included several emails between Musk and Epstein, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that Elon actively sought social interaction with Epstein despite knowing his criminal background. In late 2012, Musk explicitly asks, quote, "What day or night will be the wildest party on your island?" This wasn't a passive acceptance of an invitation. This was an inquiry about when Jeffrey Epstein, a known sex offender, would be having the wildest parties on his private island. Musk indicated he and his then-wife Tallulah Riley would attend, showing clear intent to visit. Epstein later writes to Elon on the 24th of December 2012, stating, "You are welcome to stay or just come for the day. Plenty of room. I will send a heli to get you." Musk replies the following day, on Christmas of 2012, quote, "Do you have any parties planned? I've been working to the edge of sanity this year, and so once my kids head home after Christmas, I really want to hit the party scene in St. Bart's or elsewhere and let loose. The invitation is much appreciated, but a peaceful island experience is the opposite of what I'm looking for." Epstein responds that day, writing, "Understood, I will see you on St. Barth. The ratio on my island might make Tallulah uncomfortable." Obviously referencing the ratio of men to women, or men to girls on the island, potentially making Tallulah Riley, Elon Musk's now ex-wife, feel strange. Musk replies several hours later, "Ratio is not a problem for Tallulah." If that wasn't sketchy enough for you, it gets worse. In fact, I almost missed this one, but this email, which comes exactly 2 years after the events we just discussed, in December of 2014, with an email reminder from Google Calendar, likely to one of Jeffrey Epstein's assistants. It simply states, "Elon Musk to Island, December 6th. Little other context was available for this email, but I'm going to assume this wasn't a fluke, and instead almost definitely signifies that Elon and Epstein were at least in the process of a different negotiation for him to go to the island, a separate one from the previous arrangements that were made in 2012. To be fair, there's no evidence in the released files that Musk ultimately traveled to Epstein's island, but the emails demonstrate that he was apparently willing to, and even enthusiastic about, doing so. This directly conflicts with what Elon claimed in the past before these emails leaked, with Musk repeatedly denying any close or voluntary connection to Jeffrey Epstein, portraying their interactions as minimal and/or unwanted. He consistently claimed that Epstein tried repeatedly to invite him to the island, but he refused, describing Epstein as a, quote, creep or a creepy loser. So did he ever end up actually going? We have no idea. Elon says he never went, but based on his track record, I'm not sure we can trust him anymore. Again, this one is just really sad. I know a lot of people who had faith in him, who trusted him, who were inspired by him, and looked up to him as an innovator. Never meet your heroes, I guess. Disturbing allegations have surfaced from the release regarding Bill Gates' relationship with Epstein, Allegations which his ex-wife Melinda Gates says have brought back memories of, quote, very, very painful times in their marriage. In fact, it's come out recently that Bill Gates' interactions with Epstein were a major factor in their divorce several years ago. The most explosive revelations actually come from a set of emails which Epstein only ever sent to himself, each being sent on July the 18th, 2013. He seems to have sent several modified versions of this email to, again, himself over the course of around 2 hours on that day, indicating that he had been poring over this for some time. Strangely, it appears that Epstein had been writing these emails from the perspective of Boris Nikolic, Gates' science advisor. He seems to have been pretending to be Nikolic, writing a resignation letter from his perspective in which he would also threaten to expose Gates' alleged misconduct. This appears to be either blackmail preparation or some kind of a power fantasy. Epstein seems to have created at least 7 versions of these drafts, refining allegations he could potentially use as leverage against Gates after their relationship soured. By writing from Nikolic's perspective rather than his own, Epstein could frame the damaging claims as coming from Gates' trusted advisor, making them seem more credible. Although Epstein did actually know Boris Nikolic, it doesn't appear that he was actually involved in the writing of this email at all. Instead, the most likely scenario is that Epstein was using his real friendship with Nikolic to craft more believable blackmail material for whatever reason. Again, it doesn't seem that this email reached Bill at the time. Regardless of the strange format and intentions behind the email, the information it reveals regarding Bill Gates, if true, is fucking crazy and reveals just some of the compromising dirt that Epstein had on powerful people, such as Bill Gates. One section of this email reads, quote, "What I did receive, however, was an unfriendly, strongly worded email telling me how employable I am and that I should not look to you for any significant financial help in the future. To add insult to injury, you then subsequently, with tears in your eyes, implore me to please delete the emails regarding your STD, your request that I provide you antibiotics that you can surreptitiously give to Melinda, and the description of your penis. You also made it clear to me that I am not to refer to redacted. That is another topic that must remain between the two of us." In another email Epstein sent to himself on the same day, he also writes the following, seemingly in the form of a sort of confession or resignation letter, again from the perspective of Boris Nikolic. In my role as his right hand, I had been asked on multiple occasions and, in hindsight, wrongly acquiesced to participating in things that have ranged from the morally inappropriate to the ethically unsound, and had been repeatedly asked to do other things that get near to and potentially over the line into the illegal. Though it was kindly suggested that I make a transition to a new position after my 6 years of service, and that Bill would, in his words, give me a generous package, I felt by accepting the package I would be doing a disservice to myself and my future. From helping Bill to get drugs in order to deal with consequences of sex with Russian girls, to facilitating his illicit trysts with married women, to being asked to provide Adderall for his bridge tournaments, I feel I owe it to my friend and future colleagues to admit a temporary moral failure and to ask their forgiveness in order to get this period behind me and to move on constructively with my life. Of course, it seems blatantly obvious that Bill had been involved in some morally questionable extramarital affairs, to put it lightly. Consequences of sex with Russian girls? Illicit trysts with married women? It sounds like at some point, if the facts behind these emails are true, Bill Gates desperately sought help obtaining treatment for the STDs he had allegedly contracted and apparently spread to his wife. It sounds like he might have been trying to medicate her without her knowledge in order to hide the fact that he had the disease and spread it to her, and attempt to conceal the situation from her entirely. This one didn't really fit in anywhere, but I had to throw this in. This email. Quote, "Thank you for a fun night. Your littlest girl was a little naughty." It was sent to Jeffrey Epstein from a redacted sender? What? I'm sorry, doesn't the Epstein Files Transparency Act, again, explicitly state that redactions are only to be made to protect the security of victims? Who the fuck sent this email? Epstein then replies with the following. Great. Sent from my iPad. There's no other context to this email. We have no idea who wrote it because, again, the FBI redacted the name of someone who was involved with the, quote, littlest girl who they met on a, quote, fun night with Epstein. Unbelievable. Anyways, guys, I've been digging through these files for a very long time now, and honestly, I just need to call this episode here. Of course, because we're talking about upwards of 3 million files, there's a lot of stuff I didn't come across yet or didn't cover in the video. If you're just as interested in getting to the bottom of this as I am, then perhaps I'll follow this up with a part 2, especially if we see another document dump from the Department of Justice. If you'd like to point out anything else I didn't cover here that you'd like to see me touch on in a potential follow-up, please leave those suggestions in the comments. If you made it to this point, thank you for watching. And again, if you really did just sit here through this entire video, maybe go take a walk outside. No phone, just reconnect with the real world for a moment. Despite everything, life really is beautiful. Cherish the blessings you have been given. Maintain an aggressive, unrelenting positivity. Don't let the world shut out your light. Take care of yourselves, guys, and I'll see you all in the next one.